Okay.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this sixth webinar of this Ecsite online series. I would like to thank Ecsite and their team for having made this possible. They have shown a tremendous effort to make this happen. Thank you very much, and give them a big applause. So my name is Thomas Hofer. I'm a co-founder at Curiocation.com. We're a small agency basically applying science-centered didactics for all sorts of exhibitions. So for those of you who aren't yet familiar with the screen in front of you, I'd like to explain your options to participate. First of all, which you already found most of you, you have a comment box to chat everything you like. We would also welcome if you could share your outstandingly good experiences there. Second, you have the possibility of asking any questions you like down below. Other people can upvote your questions or can remark on those questions, and we try to answer very specific questions right after each speaker, and general questions would go to the end. And thirdly, you also have the possibility of taking part in polls, which will also appear down there once we're ready to it. So, but first, before this webinar shall not be about us, I'd like to make a personal confession. I have to admit that I find myself being overly critical sometimes towards other exhibitions. I keep on seeing flaws here and there, exhibits not working, room for improvements, or just exhibits which are not talking to me at all. So, and this prevents me somehow from enjoying an exhibition as a normal visitor would do. And I wonder, is it just me as a didactic nerd, or does the same apply to a broader range of people? For example, you as exhibition professionals. So I would like to have a first poll now, which you should find right. Yep, here we go. I don't read it out loud. You can fill it while I continue to speak. But fortunately, there are also beneficial exceptions to this, where I'm not hindered to enjoy exhibits. I guess all of you happen to bump here and there into unexpected, outrageously good exhibits formats which just work, nothing to add or take away, which just makes you go, wow, this is it. You instantly know this is it. So, and this session shall all be about such moments, which is highly subjective, of course, and we could have thousands of speakers here to tell us about their experiences. So, and it was one of those moments who brought me to the idea that this could make up a great Ecsite session, having people talking about such outstandingly good but foreign masterpieces with which they have no affiliation to. Thanks to Miko at this for having made this possible. And I would like to introduce our first speaker to the stage, which is Harry White from the UK. Hi, Harry.
Hi.
You're live.
Hi, Thomas. Yep, I'm fine.
You're a Science Center consultant, currently consulting Technorama. May I ask you a difficult question? Do you consult Technorama to get better, or do you consult other science centers to better get like Technorama?
Well, I hope it's both to an extent, but more than that, I think that my consultancy is enhanced by having Technorama as a working example of a successful science centre. I don't try and make the clients like Technorama. Every science centre exists in its own environment, but being able to call on their expertise. It's a bit like an accident and emergency unit. I sort of do the triage and then call on the experts to add the services to it. I think for Technorama, providing consultancy can be quite difficult because it requires senior people with experience. But if you've got a miserable old Welshman, you can call on to start the process, and then he can call on you to fill in with up-to-date information. So far, it works beautifully. We've got a number of projects going. I'm very thrilled with it.
Well, I know there are few people with more experience than you, with decades of experience. So, Harry, if I got your presentation right, you're going to invite us to see some exhibits you can get inspired from, and how you can get inspirations to develop other exhibits from them on all new. So I guess this is where it differs from getting inspired or stealing other people's idea, when it differs from each other.
Yeah, I think you'll find that declining the verb inspiration, you have I am inspired, you pay homage, and they ripped us off.
Very fair enough. So, Harry, the stage is all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, there we go. So, as Thomas said, I'm currently working with Technorama, providing consultancy for a number of their clients. And I think without any more ado, we should bash on. Helen, I'm ready for my close-up. You can start the presentation. Fire her up. Okay, so exhibits. This is a classic exhibit. Stream of exhibits like this. This is the classic source of inspiration, the Exploratorium, and you can see it's funkily made, it's approachable, they can move it around. But then MCN Pucra in Brazil, the science center, they adapted that by simplifying the base so that the point of interaction is the tube that you can see there, and that the cabinet is made in a pretty standard way. So next example is from Science Projects Limited, where they have used gamification to increase engagement and added hoops so that the ball can be passed through the hoops. Then Ken Gleason, working at TechniQuest, switched the focus from manipulating the blower itself to the airflow around the ball. The jet is fixed, and you manipulate the exhibit by moving your hands around the ball, switching the focus to the phenomena. This is from the Aerial project in Boston, Boston Museum of Science, and they add virtual reality. You can see the camera pointing out and the real ball, and then on the screen, streamlines are added around a virtual ball, adding a layer of virtual interpretation. And if you like streamlines, then this flow tunnel from Dan Bird at Whitefire in the UK uses smoke trails to beautifully show the turbulence around, in this case, an aeroplane wing. This was done for an exhibition on flight, so it's a bit more didactic. But if you go in the other direction, like this one, Airways from Becky Lindsay's Mind Splash in the States, you can ditch the jet and blow balls and silks up tubes to create an entirely engaging experience with no didactic layer at all, just memories to be understood and appreciated later. And here, Daniel Wurtzel for Technorama adds large swathes of silk to create a uniquely experiential, whole body, beautiful exhibit, and not a little mystifying. So moving on to flow visualization and another linked taxonomy of exhibits. This is the kaleidoscope table from the artist Paul Matisse, in which a thin layer of fluid between two glass discs horizontally creates beautiful folded silk patterns in the fluid. Then at the Exploratorium, Ned Kahn takes a water-based version of the fluid, adds a Pyrex boiling flask to create the Jovian orb, seen here at the Bristol Science Centre. This is actually an updated version by Exploratorium Global Studios. Going larger creates engineering problems for a full sphere, but Gaz Smith at TechniQuest used a mirror and a blown pair of Perspex hemispheres to create a wider range of flow effects to play with. The thin layer magnifies the effects, and the larger diameter makes the differences in shear forces much larger. And of course, Ned Kahn then shows that you don't even need flow-revealing fluid, and places water and glass frit to create beautiful, intriguing patterns. Ned's technique of putting multiple variations on a theme in an exhibition brings the message across through repetition. And this is another of his, also from Turbulent Landscapes, his Tornado, inspired by Don Trumbull of the Ontario Science Centre's Polystyrene Peanut Storm exhibit. And it's another much duplicated Science Centre classic. But sometimes an exhibit can be too popular or too full body engagement, and the sought after phenomena disappears as people play Ring of Rosies within your exhibit. So TechniQuest then tried going smaller. And this version here enhances the interactivity by making the exhibit tabletop. This was done by Dan Bird and Gaz Smith and designed by Mike Ellams of Razorbyte. On the left, you can see controls that stop the mist, stop the updraft, or change the speed of the swirl. But then you don't have to go smaller. Sometimes size big can impress, but it's not really interactive. This is the Mercedes Museum in Stuttgart, 34 meters that happen once a day, and the visitors' interaction is pretty much limited to going ooh and ah. You can see a little man with a smoke generator at the bottom. So what will be the ultimate hands-off, hands-on experience? Fire, I suppose. You can see here this version by Ned Kahn and Technorama of the Fire Tornado impresses, but is the visitor in control? And so finally, third example, the Pendulum Snake, a beautiful, simple, classic exhibit. The beauty of slowly evolving patterns from a line to a sine wave to the edge of chaos and back to a line. It's fascinating. And many people have tried variations of this exhibit. But if you've got a spare big hall and 12 surplus chandeliers to hand, like the OK Museum in Linz, Austria, you can go really size big. If you look in the back of the hall, you can see the windows up at the top, and along the ceiling you can see the elaborate mechanism that starts the pendulums off together. And here is the view from the window that I talked about before, and you can see the pattern evolving. So what are the strategies for processing your original information? You can shift the scale. If it's big, make it small. If it's small, make it big. If you can shift the focus from one point to another. So to sum up, inspiration is wonderful. It's found throughout our industry. But if you merely duplicate the exhibit as you saw it, you risk missing the subtle points that are embedded in the exhibit, and the industry's pool of inspiration shrinks. Also, I would say that to pretend that this idea sprang fully formed from your mind, a product of your own genius, and not to acknowledge the sources, makes it less approachable for the visitors. So I think we should all acknowledge our sources. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Wonderful. You did a perfect timing. I have to say to the audience, this is the actual Pecha Kucha session. For those of you who don't know the Pecha Kucha, it's 20 slides, 20 seconds each, and it will auto-advance. So Harry has no possibility in influencing that seconds. And he's not a big fan of Pecha Kucha, but he did a great job. So we already have a first question, but I would like to postpone it to the end. But I would like to ask Harry, especially if, those pictures you've shown us where people have entered the tornado, would you see it as a bug or a feature, even though, of course, it the effect won't get any better. But for example, in the Technorama exhibit of Daniel Wurzel's theme, they actually allowed it to go on stage, and I think it's a big enhancement. So how would you respond to that?
I think that there's room for diversity in all types of exhibits within our business, but then I would say that. Daniel Wurzel's exhibit is magnificent. My wife videoed me in it, and my daughter dubbed over Kate Bush's Wuthering Heights. It's a horrific experience, and it's out on YouTube somewhere. I'd advise you to avoid it. So my point is that variations suit different centres. All centres are different, our audiences are evolving, so variation is a good thing, even though you might think that people only visit their local science centre and don't see these variations. If it enriches the field, I think it's good for us. Oh, and one more thing about the pictures. As you know, Wales is still largely in lockdown, so I have stolen images from the internet far and wide, and I acknowledge all copyrights that there may be for those images.
Fine thoughts. Thank you very much, Harry. We'll later on hear Harry, Ian Russell. I guess he will have a different perspective on this, on how much you should allow visitors in doing something wrong. But that later on. We'll have Camilla. Hello, Camilla.
Hi, Thomas.
Everything's fine with you?
Everything good.
You're calling from Italy, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Living at home in Milan, as most of us.
Okay, you're a development international partnership coordinator at Museo Nazionale della Scienza e della Tecnologia Leonardo da Vinci. So, and you've published recently a book on art in science centers. Tell me, with art, you don't necessarily mean exhibits like those from NetCon, which we've seen in the previous presentation, which can be both regarded as art and science equally well at the same time, do you?
No, I think there has been a trend in the last years, and everyone has been saying that they've been doing collaborations and interdisciplinary work. So when I wrote this book, gathering actually experiences from, institutions from all over the world, my curiosity was really to understand how we as science communicators are looking at art. What can we do that's really relevant? And I think I was trying to understand if the collaborations were done somehow superficially also, or they were more deep. And I think, well, don't want to spoil the conclusions of the book, but basically I think that in a way I've identified 3 ways in which we interact with art. And one is that we use somehow art to visualize concepts that are difficult for science to visualize. And this has been done since, the dawn of time, really. The other thing is that we can learn from art some, I think, practices that can help us in the way education works, science education works. And also it can open up issues on the social side of science. So these are the things that I think I was exploring. And it connects a little bit to what I'm going to talk about in a way.
Yeah, you're going to talk about some experiences completely outside of museums. But first of all, we'll have another poll right now, which will come down here in a second. And I leave the stage to you, Camilla.
Thank you very much, Thomas. First thing I must say is that I must admit I'm feeling somewhat nervous to be sitting here among my fellow panelists who are all really wise and lifelong experts in exhibit design and collection. But I'm gathering up my courage, so bear with me. It will be a bit of a race through ideas, but I hope this PechaKucha journey will give us some food for thought also outside. Okay, Helen, here we go. In the past months, when I was preparing this session, I started looking at old pictures of trips and visits. But we were sitting in our homes, all locked out of our museums. So I somewhat felt the need to look outside our walls and turn my attention to some stray exhibits that live outside our museum doors. Can these experiences that I'm going to talk about be considered exhibits? Well, I'm not so sure we can call them so, but perhaps it's not fundamental to decide whether they deserve this name or not. The point for me was that they worked for me. You will see that they're not necessarily scientific experiences, but for me, they were fun, they were interactive, they were somewhat wowing, they were informative, they carried information, they were intrinsically motivating, and they encouraged my personal exploration, and they were somewhat associated with my everyday life. So let me start from one of the oldest exhibits I encountered. You're seeing the entrance to the toilets of the old Exploratorium building in San Francisco. In the time I spent at the Exploratorium, I would bump into these incredible accidental optical illusions every time nature called. And I used to think how amazing it was to have an exhibit embedded in the interior design. Then we moved to another restroom exhibit. At ASTAC 2018 in Hartford, an Exploratorium team invited attendees to choose the toilets according to their eye color instead of their being male or female. It was a very queer feeling and an amazing opportunity to reflect on identity and classifications outside the walls of sessions and exhibitions. Back to optical illusions, you bump into these works of street artist Justin Bevan, both outside and online. An elderly aunt sent me this picture, and my children, they grew crazy. They were really intrigued with understanding how the eye and the brain worked, so it was a good trigger for them. I'm sure millions of people have seen at least a reproduction of Banksy's masterpieces. And looking at these incredible works of public art, one is drawn to examine, I think, both the technical ingenuity and the social questions that they so successfully and ironically raise. I'm now taking you to Switzerland in a playground in Mainau, the Flower Island. In the background, you can see an Archimedes screw and other common water exhibits. And these have become more and more popular in parks all over the world. And I find incredibly precious that places dedicated to free play outside our walls have decided to incorporate classic science exhibits. Now we're jumping on a bus in Ljubljana. This is a project from some years ago by Hisha Experimentor. They created science cartoons, you can see them on the walls of the bus, that suggested practical experiments on physics of movement. They stuck them there so that you would stumble upon them on your daily trip to work or school. Many artists have looked at science, as we were saying before. Here, American environmental artist Sandra Poli has turned real-time data on air pollution into a large-scale projection, which you can see streaming down the side of a building in Paris during COP21. And I challenge you to miss that when you're taking your evening stroll. And to stay on the topic of artists, here is Olafur Eliasson's ice block. He placed these blocks in the City Hall Square in Copenhagen with the idea that touching the ice and having an emotional and physical relation with it, seeing how fast it melted, would help raise awareness of climate change. This next exhibit is Cloud. It's a well-known sculpture by Indian-born British artist Anish Kapoor in Chicago. The fun thing about this massive organic-shaped mirror is that you will always see someone around it pulling funny faces or attempting an artistic selfie or sending to friends a picture of the morphed skyline of Chicago. Ned Can, mentioned before, designs dozens of exhibits for science centers, but he also researched public art. This was a wall he made at San Francisco Airport. The air moves hundreds of small metal discs, creating intriguing ripples that bring airflows into the realm of the visible for all who transit through. This that you're going to see now is a more didactic installation in Warsaw, the city of Frédéric Chopin. When you sit on these benches, you can listen to his compositions and read some information on his life. What I personally found irreplaceable was the combination of the musical experience and my being physically in the places he visited and worked in. This is a yet-to-be-conceived exhibit. It was by Walter Stavalots. He designed this as a poster with QR codes in which you can access VR videos of coral reefs. But imagine if the QR codes were printed on stickers and stuck in schools, at bus stops, in shops, everywhere. Moving to the realm of the digital, I bet you've all stumbled on this Google app. I'm not a great fan of apps, but as many thousands of other users, I couldn't resist the temptation to check out which artwork character I resembled. Turns out I resembled the wife of a French court painter from the 1800s. And again, my children and their teachers as well got into playing with the 3D augmented reality animals that Google recently made available on its outrageously powerful research engine. This crocodile was placed on my balcony, and we soon knew everything about his eating and living habits. Another playful idea introduced on Instagram during the COVID-19 lockdown was this ironic project. This project got a big boost when the Rijksmuseum promoted it on its Facebook page with the likes of the Met and the Louvre. So it's an inspiring example, I think, of collaborative commons between museums and individual creators out there on the web. And last but not least, the amazing app that Michael Gordon mentioned last week during Ecsite AC opening day, the Dawn Chorus. This is a citizen science and arts project in which dawn soundscapes from all over the world are being collected. It's a new way to talk about how humans perceive nature around them. So I guess my hope is that we can keep looking outside our walls, learn from and connect to others, and in general try to understand how we can embed even more successfully our exhibits in the common fabric of our everyday life. And that's it, I think. Thank you very much. I hope it wasn't too much of a rush.
Thank you very much, Camilla. You've done a tremendous job. Clap your hands. Hey, I can assure you don't have to be an expert in exhibit design to tell if something just works. If it works for you, that's fair enough. Everyone is an expert to judge if it works. So, well, just look down there. We haven't yet received any questions so far. That would save us some time to go in the end. Or would you have anything to say? With not, we're going further to Claire Pillsbury. Thank you very much, Camilla.
See you later.
Thank you very much. Claire, are you with us? Well, she's from San Francisco. That's going to go over underneath sea cable. I have to watch my backstage channel if we have anything on Claire. Oh, here she is. Hello, Claire.
Hello, Thomas.
Hey, to tell the audience, the case, the reason that it looks somehow dark is not the reason that it's still dark in San Francisco anymore. What time is it in San Francisco?
Oh, it's almost 6:30. Everybody should be up and at it, but the sun is still rising here.
Okay, we'll get better. So, Claire, I know you're a program director of museum practice and exploratorium in San Francisco. We already know each other for quite a while, and I can tell I only knew few people who have more experience than Claire has. So, may I ask you, how would you have responded to the very first question, where it was, is it still possible for you as a professional to experience exhibits and exhibitions as a normal visitor would do?
Yes, this is always our problem, that we know too much. When we go inside an exhibition, we see all the details and we imagine the work behind them. But
Yep.
the very best exhibits take you back to being a visitor. They enchant you and you can enjoy them as if you're seeing an exhibit for the first time. So that's what I really appreciate the most in an outstanding exhibit.
Yeah, you're like me as well. I really enjoy having those moments where everything just works. So thank you very much, Claire. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you. So the title of my presentation is Encouragement, because I believe that that's one of the most important things we can get from seeing an outstanding exhibit, to see what we didn't think was originally possible, that it is possible. So Helen, I'm ready for you to start the show. So some exhibitions are outstandingly good because in addition to their superb design, they encourage us in our own work. They show us how we could take more risks. They give us the courage to address important topics of great relevance to science and to society and our public. And this exhibition is one that broke many rules. Nous et les autres is something that I saw first at the Musée de l'Homme in Paris back in 2017. And it's newly relevant, I agree, but it has actually stayed with me very strongly the past 3 years as a remarkable and important exhibit. Of course, it broke rules, as you can see right here. There's a lot of wall text just like this. And we know visitors won't read, but maybe if in the title I see it is about me, I will read. This was an exhibition that was about ideas, abstract ideas, and not phenomena-based. And yet it fascinated me and its visitors. It addressed a topic that is uncomfortable, stereotypes and prejudice. And how was I to be involved in observing this? In fact, the way the exhibition starts is in an airport lounge, a very odd environment for a museum, but familiar. Taking a seat, you waited for a turn for the screens that seemed to be fascinating other visitors. What was on those screens? In fact, those screens showed you an example of what bias is by having you take the implicit association test. The results can be surprising and even shocking. You were grateful that this was a private experience. This exhibit was more than immersive. It was personal because you were part of the story. Visitors of all ages and ethnicities waited to interact, even though those touch screen units are labeled "Welcome to the Airport of Prejudice." It was an unexpected and very strong way to begin. The journey started in the past, and again, there was a surprise. The museum itself was in the story. The very rooms that you had just walked through before entering this exhibit were in the pictures on the wall. While in 1938, the museum director and staff rejected the idea of a racial hierarchy, they also accepted that science was able to make racial categorizations. And it was both horrifying and fascinating to learn that the museum published a journal, Race and Racism. It was active from 1937 to 39 to fight anti-Semitism and fascism, but at the same time, the museum bolstered the idea that there was a scientific basis to race. Incredibly, this exhibition made a timeline of documents dramatic and suspenseful. The curved progression and touchscreen sources of other archival information drew your attention, and the story of the slave trade led you to carved figures as vivid and serious as a graphic novel. There were books on display in glass cases, and right next to them, advertisements and commercial packaging was more or less exploding out of the glass cases. They showed the recent past, one parents' or grandparents' generations, visual caricatures, a window into those attitudes and what has shaped the stereotypes of us and them. But it wasn't all static. The history of racism, the struggles against it were presented to you to witness in archival footage and film of very recent events. It was impossible not to feel the reality and relevance. Now, this exhibition was designed by the brilliant Francois Conveno, and he constantly shifted the context. You could sit down in this room and hear from life-size film projections of sociologists, economists, and policy experts. The room was not formal, having the cartoon of a family home on the two side walls. And in another change of tone, there was this room that displayed the statistics, the irrefutable numbers of the increasing, decreasing tolerance of how discrimination affects hiring and career, and personal stories were told in that center table. Racism affects every corner of society. And as we know, protest is a normal part of citizens expressing themselves collectively. However, museums typically don't touch this kind of controversial topic. But should you ignore what is happening right outside in the plaza next to your museum, what your own visitors see and some may even participate in? Now, science was not forgotten in this exhibit. Visitors could push aside these colorful DNA ribbons to explore the science of population genetics and learn conclusively there is no scientific basis for racial categories. But if there is no scientific basis for race, why do we still have these serious disparities? As a visitor, you had to confront this, walking through the larger-than-life word sculpture égalité, equality. Equality for whom and how? Perhaps a philosopher could help us reconcile these different perspectives of science, politics, economics, and psychology, history. Well, let's go to the cafe and listen into the philosopher's point of view. Where does the idea of race, what does the idea of race mean in current society? The chairs invite you to sit down. And putting aside what the philosophers had to say, what do the visitors think? I watched the visitors in this exhibit move very slowly, entranced with the ideas, talking with each other. And even at the end of the day, they had to announce 3 times that the museum was closing. The galleries were still full of people. The staff had to come through to insist that we leave. So what does an exhibit like this tell us? We can take big risks. We can go against our normal instinct. We need these things, not because we're cowards, but because we need the encouragement of an outstandingly good exhibit that is outstandingly relevant to visitors. And I think Thomas is coming back on.
It's not me to switch me in.
Oh, sorry. I think I was supposed to cue you.
No. Thank you very much. A very actual topic, unfortunately, I guess, in the US. Have you chosen this topic before the actual events in the US, or right just because?
Yes, I think at the beginning when we were all expecting to go to Slovenia and we were writing our descriptions, this was the exhibit I had in mind, partly because it goes against our normal, familiar and comfortable territory of phenomena-based exhibits. But yet science has a lot to tell us about stereotypes, prejudice, and racism, and it affects people's lives so much. I thought it was a very, very good exhibit. And so I wanted to talk about it, but now it's more relevant than ever. Everybody's talking about this topic.
Yeah, nice to see that not everything has to be hands-on to just work. It's kind of rather traditional approach, but still though, it's a nice example of variety and diversity for an important, very actual topic. So once again, we shouldn't believe we're just the only ones to have the crown in exhibition making. Thank you very much. We have a question here from Michael Grulks. Would it be possible to make a similar exhibition in the US? I guess this was in the US, wasn't it? Oh.
No, this was not in the US. I believe it would be possible. I think all of these things take well, you can have the encouragement of seeing how successful this was, but I think people are fascinated about these topics. Sometimes we underestimate how important these kind of topics are for people to engage with. And the Minnesota Science Museum did create an exhibit on race. The Exploratorium created an exhibit on identity. These topics are so relevant to people, and I think sometimes we talk ourselves out of something because we feel it's just too risky. And in fact, visitors care a lot about these ideas and they want to understand them better.
Thank you very much, Claire. We're going to have our last speakers now. Thank you very much, Claire. You did a tremendous job.
Thank you, Thomas.
And I'd like to bring up Ian Russell. I forgot to mention before, I forgot to mention a new poll which already appeared. Some of you may already have seen this poll. And here we go. Hi, Ian.
Hello.
First, when we've assembled in the green room, we had some audio delays. So please be sorry if there should be any audio delays with Ian. I guess it will be fine just in a moment. Hey, Ian, you're such a wonderful... Yeah, it will. You're such a wonderful one-man show. You're exhibit designer, you're a science show performer, you're a consultant. Um, I could count many things what you aren't. But tell me, we already see the slide of your presentation, which is called The Raw Diversity of Nature. Can you tell us how did you came up with this title?
Okay, it's a quotation, which you'll see during the presentation. But my concern at the moment is that science centres seem to be turning to the use of screen-based exhibits to minimise the risk of COVID-19 infection. And this worries me because, well, I always worry. I speak a lot about the balance between exploration and information in a science centre experience. And exploration is so important for a good science centre visit, and it can be crushed by too much information, I believe. It's a delicate balance, and I've got a rather controversial example to show you, which is the attempt to illustrate this.
We're looking forward to. Yeah, please go on.
Okay, I'm starting. So I bought this book of short essays by the evolutionary biologist Stephen Jay Gould shortly after it was published in 1996. And one of the essays was about time he spent at the Natural History Museum in Dublin, in Ireland. And the Dublin Natural History Museum opened in the mid-1800s, and its last major upgrade was completed in 1905. So frozen in time, it's a museum of a museum. Gould praised it for not replacing glass case displays with modern interactive exhibits. His essay was an eloquent defense of cabinet exhibits. And even as a designer of interactive exhibits myself, I had to agree that good exploratory glass cases displays should not be replaced by inappropriate interactives. The following year, 1997, I met Jorge Wagensberg at a conference in Dublin. Aware of his formidable reputation as a museum designer, I mentioned this essay to him, and Jorge came with me as we set off to find the old museum. After walking through the streets of Dublin, we found the Natural History Museum easily enough. We went inside, and we were instantly transported 100 years backwards in time. The ground floor display is dominated by two awesome skeletons of Megaceros giganteus, the extinct Irish elk. A huge, very badly preserved basking shark hangs above the maze of glass cases. Well, together, we explored the maze, surrounded by life forms of all kinds and every possible size. Gould's essay included a memorable phrase, the raw diversity of nature, to describe his impression of this experience. And a sign on the back doors informed us that the exhibition continues upstairs. So we climbed the grand old stone staircase to the first floor, and the sight that met our eyes was just breathtaking. The sign on the door was right. The exhibition did indeed continue upstairs. Here was a much larger space, with two higher mezzanine levels, tightly packed with a bewildering assortment of specimens, scarcely changed in the past 100 years. Somewhere, insects labelled in Charles Darwin's own handwriting sit in a drawer. Another contains a saber-toothed tiger skeleton that was never put on display due to lack of money. Local people affectionately call this place the Dead Zoo. Over 300,000 visitors a year certainly think these old-fashioned exhibits still work. Is there a lesson for us here? Do we allow enough exhibition space and time for people to explore the raw diversity of nature for themselves? This was a huge experience of actual reality. It saddens me that science centres are corona-proofing their exhibits by increased use of screen-based exhibitions. Yet here was a much more exploratory, hands-off exhibition. Even the more time-worn specimens were full of character and interest, with many surprises. Handwritten labels were a reminder of all the people who had created the display over so many years. And exploring the mezzanine galleries above revealed further surprises. For example, these amazingly fragile glass models were made 150 years ago in Dresden by Leopold and Rudolf Blaschke. As Stephen Jay Gould wrote in his essay, you can put one beetle in a cabinet, usually an enlarged model and not a real specimen, surround it with fancy computer graphics and push-button whatsits, and then state no other group maintains such diversity. Or you can fill the same cabinet with real beetles from each of 1,000 different species, all of different colours, shapes and sizes, show everything and incite wonder by sheer variety. And this applies to all scientific phenomena, not just beetles. So, can we learn anything from Dublin's dead zoo? Perhaps the importance of presenting a diversity of real phenomena at a time when more and more screen-based exhibits are appearing. Personally, I love Frank Oppenheimer's walk in the woods metaphor for exploration. I often mention this. An experience where there is enough diversity and enough informality for people to feel free to choose their own paths, make their own discoveries, and satisfy their own curiosity. Of course, information is necessary in a museum, in an exhibition, and more was needed in the Old Dublin Natural History Museum. But we must be careful not to overdo it. Listening to a tour guide on a bus is not the same as a walk in the woods. I end with an exhibit from Jorge Wagensberg's Cosmocacia in Barcelona. As science communicators, we can never be sure of knowing what works, but let us not oversimplify. Let us not over-explain. Let us share our delight in the raw diversity of nature.
Sorry for the delay. It was Elvira in the background.
That's right.
Thanks, Ian. Once again, congratulations. What a masterpiece you delivered. Once again, it could be poetry. You're a real master of Pecha Kucha, I have to say. By the way, yeah, down here you see a link from Ian from a Pecha Kucha session as well, which he held at Ecsite 2017 in Porto, I guess, where he had a wonderful presentation about when too much explanation stifles exploration. Go have a visit there. Me, myself, I started crying there hearing this. It's wonderful. And as this as well, congratulations. I have a question for you. Can it be too much diversity all at once? Could people get overstrained when visiting the Dublin Natural History Museum?
It's not a perfect visitor experience. The point I was making was it's a very, very good example of exhibition diversity. And the fact is that people there just really do love it. It has visitor numbers, return visits, it belongs to the local people, and so on. So I was making the point that an exhibition can work with virtually no information at all. But of course, there's a balance. But I do believe that we live in an information age where we can sometimes overdo information and explanation, and that can crush exploration.
Yes, indeed. I'm sorry, we had some audio issues with you, but it was just a short delay, but I guess we heard all your speech. I have no problem about that. Andrew Johnson is asking you, Ian, you know as well, we plan to reopen the Camera Obscura on 15th of July. Any tips for keeping the experience intact while keeping visitors safe? Well, probably a short answer. We won't allow for free consultancy using this Ecsite online session, but...
It's lovely to hear from you, Andrew. Well, you've got a wonderful display there. I guess not everything has to be touched. There's going to be all sorts of discussion about how to avoid infection in an exhibition. That's a whole other topic. But let's just do our best not to lose the diversity. And you've got plenty of that there in Edinburgh, Andrew.
Okay, so far for that. I hope, Andrew, good answer for you. I forgot to mention we had another poll for Ian, which is now the fourth poll. Some of you already responded to this poll. So I'd like to open the discussion now for everyone to ask questions. We have some minutes left, not very much. We're a little bit late than we thought. Could you, Elvira, bring me more people on stage? I would like to have Claire and Camilla on stage, if possible. So as long as we're waiting for them to appear on stage, Ian, you asked priorly a question if art is only useful in science centers to help us learn, or is it also useful for helping us to appreciate science differently? Could you a little bit elaborate more on that?
My question, well, I was thinking that Claire was emphasizing the sheer practical value of art in a science exhibition. And I was just thinking, it doesn't have to be just totally practical always. It's so important sometimes to step aside and take science outside the classroom, outside the museum, as Claire said, and just appreciate, as I said, the raw diversity of nature. Art helps us appreciate things in a different way from when we're just trying to learn, I think, sometimes. What do you think, Claire?
I think we sometimes forget. Oh, well, it was Camilla's presentation.
It was Camilla. Sorry, it was Camilla.
But
I was asking. Yes.
But because I have the chance, I'd like to weigh in on this. I actually think we sometimes overestimate the separation between people's objective absorption or understanding of something and their subjective absorption. I think people's feelings about a topic are really completely melded together with their understanding of it. So we should be considering the same thing when we present ideas to them, that people have positive, negative, feeling threatened by or feeling sympathetic with almost every idea we bring to them. So their emotional engagement is absolutely critical, both in their exhibit experience, but in their learning anything. And I guess we should give Camilla a chance to respond too.
Yeah. Apparently we're having some issues in bringing Camilla back on stage. If I shall continue, I have a question for you. So, what could we say about factors determining? Oh, here she is.
Hi.
Hi. So, please, could you respond to the question of Ian?
Yes, Ian, I totally agree with you. And I think as science communication practitioners, we've been using art for a long time as a means to convey messages. So in a way, there was a utilitarian use of consideration of art in our institutions. And this is really what I think now is being disrupted a little bit. And we are moving towards collaborations that appreciate more the peculiarities of art in itself, which means opening up ideas, which means connecting to the emotional, which means connecting to the unsaid and the future and the imagination side of things, which somehow have been seen as something opposed to science as well, you know, opposite. So where there's rationality, and then on the other side there's emotion, where there is concrete phenomena, on the other side there's imagination. But actually, even in science research, this is being challenged. This concept is being challenged, I think, today. And science centers and science museums have always been somehow reflecting things that have been going on in the research realm of science as well. You know, when science was beginning to, for example, classify things, museums began to classify as well. So when research was beginning to classify conceptually, museums were beginning to classify in their narratives. When science was focusing more on physics, science centers were born, which were basically exploring physics. So I think we go along with the trends in science research as well. And I think this trying to bring arts in is somehow, I don't have the word for that, a test that something is going on in the realm of scientific research, that science is bringing in more of the aspects and of the ways that artistic practice works. So I'm not sure if I have answered at all your questions, but I totally agree with the fact that we are not using art for conveying scientific messages and learning.
Thank you much, Camilla. It would
I agree with Claire's point that the affective dimension is very important.
It is, definitely. It is one of the most important. I have to keep the watch in mind. It's already quite late. We'll have to come to the end of the session, but I would want to end without having another few issues talking about. When we speak about exhibits that just work, it could be just luck or coincidence that they work, but this would be just rather unsatisfying, ending this session with saying, oh, it's just luck. I would ask the question to any of you, what do you think? Are there certain factors which you can influence in making exhibits just work? Ian, of course, you should have an answer to this. Exploration, of course, but can it be more hands down how you can get into exploratory atmosphere? This was another question asked. Exploration needs time and the right atmosphere in gallery. How can we create a better exploratory atmosphere, was asked. Could you respond to that, Ian?
I know I'm just repeating myself, but I do think diversity is a vital key to an exploratory environment. And when we focus on specific learning outcomes, we often tend to reduce diversity in order to direct people along a particular path. And exploration involves people choosing their own path. through a multitude of options.
We have Harry here now on stage. I guess this is
Okay. Well, I was ready to reply about 3 questions ago. So what are we up to now? We're in about engagement. I think what matters in making an exhibit well is effort and evaluation and hard work. It takes a lot of hard work to make something simple. There's the Blaise Pascal quote that if I had more time, I'd have written a shorter letter. And it's very true that the more effort we put into honing something and making it simple and making it communicate properly, the simpler it looks. But that merely hides all the hard work that we did to get to that point.
Thank you.
And I guess I should give a very short answer because I know Ecsite wants to come on. I believe that allowing for visitors' own agency sends an opportunity for them to connect themselves personally, and something that really triggers their curiosity. I think that's why we need to constantly observe visitors as well as use our own experience to judge what's a good exhibition or what will be a great experience for them.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry we have to hurry because we're already over time. Thank you very much, all my speakers. Give them a big applause. You've been great. So I shall have a few ending words, if I may. We all would agree that we would need to have a higher impact, and therefore it really comes up to the question if our exhibits just work. Because if they don't work at all. And of course, we all know how difficult it may be to come up with an exhibit that just works. But I can assure you, it's not only luck, it's also a craft. And foremost, it's also a decision and dedication to make exhibits just work. So we're having now Rachel Kucha coming on stage saying a few closing words to us. Hi, Raquel.
Hi, Thomas. Thank you so much. And thank you all the speakers who made this webinar. Nice to see you here. So yeah, my name is Raquel de Cunha and I'm talking to you from my kitchen. I'm the Communications and Events Manager at Ecsite, the European Network of Science Centers and Museums. And I'm here to wrap up as this was the very last webinar of the Ecsite Online series. As most of you might know, Ecsite Online was born as a response to the pandemic that prevented the science engagement community from coming together at the Ecsite conference in June as usual. But the urge to exchange ideas, network, debate, and celebrate across borders is too strong in this professional community to be stopped by a virus. We thus moved online, and the generosity of Ecsite members and sponsors allowed us to offer a free program of weekly webinars from mid-May until today. And we are also running a string of drop-in sessions for members. We hosted an amazing Ecsite Day conference that some of you might have attended last week on the 11th of June, which you can replay. And this Friday, we'll wrap up this exciting online adventure with the Ecsite Business Day. So save your seats using the link right below. So while I have you here, and if you're not planning to join us this Friday, stay in touch. Join us at the Ecsite app, our new tool to network. My colleague will drop the link for you to get it on your phone. I really just love this new Ecsite tool. It has this minimal look. It's focusing on the #1 need of our community to build meaningful connections. We have now over 1,200 users and over 400 complete profiles, which you can browse and contact directly. We also have this new feature, which you won't find in any other app for the SciComm community, the meetups. Anyone with a profile in this app can create or join an existing meetup. Tomorrow we have some, Friday we have some others, and you can just join or create your own, check it out, and start hosting the conversations you need right now. So one good use for this meetups feature would be actually to start getting planning for your next Ecsite conference session. The call for session proposals will open mid-August, and we'll be so happy to welcome you all in Stavanger, Norway next year. And of course, the best way to stay tuned to our news and events is by signing up to Spokes, our monthly digital magazine. My colleague will also drop the link in the chat. So thank you, everyone. I really hope you've been enjoying Ecsite Online. And this isn't goodbye. I'll see you Friday when my colleague Helen and I will host a day with a lot on exhibitions and visitor experiences. And actually, quite a promising talk since you guys have been talking about it. There will be a talk in the afternoon on how to corona-proof exhibits. So discover the program in the app, follow the link below to save your seats, and see you then. Bye-bye.